Well, theories, well, you know better, but a theory comes generally with several concepts, and using a concept is going into a mining field. It's not an easy task. Why should we be careful when we are using concepts?
Yeah, we need to be quite clear about the definition. Let me give an example. In international relations, but also concerning politics in a nation state, the concept of hegemony is being used. And here we do find that from different theoretical perspectives, the definition of hegemony is different. So one is saying, well, it is just about imposing your will. And from another perspective, it is a situation where actually not everyone, but important other groups are in support of it, are having consents that. And one needs to be aware of that. You know, you have to be very clear how you define a concept that, and then try to operationalize it.
What is that?
Well, operationalizing means that you have to think about how you can make the concept, this abstract concept, especially an abstract concept like hegemony, visible in the field there. And to identify a situation where there is hegemony or where there is not hegemony. So you have then to, through your definition, be quite clear what you understand. And when you say hegemony is a situation where there is social consensus there, then you have to find out how you want to then measure this social consensus there. And there are, of course, very different ways of doing that.
But like the hegemony you mentioned, I mean, some concepts are really hard to measure. So how, what would be your proposal? How would you then, what are the thresholds for the concept as such? They are in the gray area.
Yes, when you look at the concept of hegemony, then of course there may be different states in between a situation of clear dominance or clear anarchy and a situation of hegemony. And therefore you have to introduce further differentiations that, and you would have to say, well, it's a hegemony, for example, that is supported passively, so not so strong, or it is a hegemony very actively supported there. Or you say the hegemony is rather limited in its geographic scope, or not, and so on. So you tried then to introduce further differentiations, but you have to make them also visible, you know, then. And there are different strategies. So if we stick to the issue of hegemony, one can, of course, then look at elite discourse, but one could also see to what degree the population is also somehow supporting some of those ideas that are hegemonic. And then you would perhaps go for surveys, or you do then group interviews and so on. So you have to think then creatively what would be a good way to somehow capture whether there is consensus or alienation or outright resistance.
Once a field research is done, how do I relate to theory?
Well, this is a key issue, that at the end you reflect on your original assumptions, theoretical assumptions, and see to what extent your empirical research validates your previous assumptions. And that you then reflect on it and write down it, so that in a way your final chapter would be a reflection on your research design with a specific focus on your theoretical initial ideas, and to what extent now your field research has substantiated these kind of causal claims, or whether the theory needs to be revised, adjusted in a major way, in a smaller way, some new ideas added to it, and that you then also relate that to other people's writings concerning the theory.
Well, thank you very much for your answers. Fascinating. You know, PhD takes years. It's a really long process. Do you have last remarks for a PhD researcher?
Well, one should not forget about the writing process. So when you start, you should also start writing rather early. Of course, knowing that you might have to revise a lot of it, but that you got into the flow. You need to come into the flow of writing that. And then that you develop certain work packages, that you think of that you are not trying to think about the whole immediately, but that you go a little bit step by step. That you, for example, in the beginning really do a nice literature review, that you are on top of the literature, that you know what are the key questions, what are some of the gaps, what is then the gap you really want to fill, what kind of theoretical approach then can be justified, and that you then take time to write the theory chapter. And that usually takes quite some time if you are not yet really familiar with the theory. My experience has been, and also my own personal experience, that a lot of time I had to spend on really understanding the theoretical arguments and also the language of it. And that's, I think, is rather important that you start writing so that you get into this specific vocabulary of the theory. And it becomes more familiar to you and then more easy to apply. And as a general final remark, a good friend of mine in our network, long-time researcher, Eddie Webster, when he came to Kassel for 1 year to start our center, and we have had this big mountain in front of us in setting up a center, he was asking us, how do you eat an elephant? Well, the answer was bite by bite. And that's how you should also start your PhD thesis.
Christoph Scherer, thank you very much for your time. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks for the questions.